That's interesting. Let's take a look here. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. So, this was the better situation, but I'll have to check the higher time frames for RSI stuff and just see what happened here. So, it looks good though. Just starting to wonder, maybe we just get that full S curve out of here. If this isn't the middle, it might be a 585 push. Oh man, it was close to what we estimated. Pretty darn close. No, I think it's trying. I think it's trying to go, and I don't think there was anything particularly bad about today. I'm gonna clean up some of this just a bit. This one's kind of extra. These are just trajectories. I'm gonna like lessen them a bit more. My goal for the next 30-40 minutes, watch the price of course, but I really want to see if I can get a good picture of next week. So thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think a 5 fall wouldn't be horrible. Wouldn't be bad. But at this point, I'm thinking it might just go because that M cross looks basically done. Hey, knock it off. Hey, son, you have permission to spray Beazle if he keeps messing with her. Cat's going crazy. It's essentially like a reverse, a reversal of what happened over here. So there would be an expectation of perhaps an upthrust. You don't want it to keep reversing forever, but that would push you back over here. Well, I don't think anyone was expecting earnings to beat. So it might get a partial miss. This time, partial beat. It's weaker year over year. He's going to do nothing but like hype up the next quarter. That's been his thing lately. If he's smart, he'll just talk about things being in the rearview mirror. He'll talk about bolstering debt positions. He'll talk about equity that they have on hand, cash they have on hand. He'll talk about the big box office and expectations for next quarter. If he's smart, he'll downplay the weakness. May mention it. He'll drop the stock for a minute, and then hopefully if he's quieter about it, he just moves on, you know. So yeah, my goal right now is going to be to get kind of a good center point for next week. I want to see if I can find it. Yeah, I know. Deadpool numbers should be pretty good, and then we'll see what happens. It'll get a lot of buzz. I'm sure even if people aren't going to the movies to see it right now, it'll get a lot of buzz, and then there'll be bolstering numbers next week. I'm going to guess that the reason they moved up earnings in part was because of, and the early release is in part because of some of the bigger blockbuster movies that just came out. So they can talk about those. They'd have to expect that this would have to be a big weekend. So they're going to be able to talk about that immediately and then talk about the lineup. Yeah, I'm thinking it's like sort of just a reversal of what we saw. I think the way that I looked at this is probably pretty good. Genuinely kind of amazed that it went and just did the right things here. So, I mean, there could have been a number of things that could have happened today, and this was one of the better things that could have happened, I suppose, is just pushing up and holding support high. I mean, didn't have any kind of negativity really behind it. It hit that target and held up pretty well. I do believe that's going to be our 50-50 right there at 515. So it's looking like 586 maybe on an extension. So I think 586 is likely as a first push. I'm going to stick with that. I'm just going to do my thing now, so I'm going to be moving. Yeah, this is still the big trend. So there's a couple things here that might happen. We could still see it move back Monday. I mean, it could still kind of come back down to 5 and then advance. That's not really the concern. If it did that, I wouldn't be like upset by it. This to me seems likely for a few reasons, but we didn't come back down, so I'm not positive. I mean, like I said, we could make that extension as like almost like an inverted up thrust. It'd be like a spring back to like 5. So since you crossed over here, it found support though. Like that's the thing. It's looking for that M cross on the rise. It's there. I mean, like I feel like unless you just have like a flat out breakdown Monday, I'm going to mark it off just because I want to remember that this is here and it's not that big of a deal. If we go back down to it, this is not a huge deal on Monday. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to just focus on this. I know I'm in upside down land, but sometimes that helps me. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, 68 million right now. That's pretty good for an opening. Like, that's like Marvel movie kind of stuff. I remember some of those early openings pretty big. They do limited release openings sometimes, and then they do the full one. So I think this is a critical marker. Yeah, you can see it written into this. I'm going to focus on cleaning this up a bit and trying to get my chart to be where I want it to be. I know 513 is a level. I'm going to get rid of that one. I'm going to get rid of... I want to get rid of 496. I got 2 here. I don't need 2. I'm going to get rid of this for now. And this for now. And this one for now. This trajectory out looks the same as... I don't even know how I did that. Why did I do that like that? 36 degrees? Was that because of this one? Can't remember. What is this? 49 degrees? Well, I messed it up. I changed it. 52, 49. Pretty close. You don't need win over 100. So I'm pretty bullish on AMC on the long term. I think it's going to take time though. I'd have to give you my impression of it, and I can't give you anybody else's. So, notwithstanding some kind of massive break here, which I guess could happen. If we had an early break here, it could change a lot of things. So that's as in like somewhere around November this year, if there was some kind of massive change, I could see this being pretty significant in terms of change of the timing. But right now, I mean, it's just measured out on the big picture. I'll just give it to you and then we can go back to tinkering. I really want to get a good setup for next week, but this is the big picture. And remember how we just did that thing on the micro with the double flush? We just did this. Do you remember this? It's the same thing. So, I mean, it's pretty crazy because ignore all this stuff down bottom, but it's basically the exact same thing I just did. I don't know. Isn't that kind of wild? So, yeah, I totally think this is probably where we intersect over here, and it's going to be in 2025, and that maybe we'll get up to past 100 in June of 2026. I know it sounds like a long time, but it just is what it is. It's a long-term chart. You got to take it in stride as it presents itself. So the big deals right now is that we really haven't been able to get across like these bigger center marks. It seems like once that's happened, it's moved pretty fast. So I actually think that early 2025 we're probably going to get back to like 70s. I mean, that's early part of the year. That's spring. So that's not that far away. It really isn't. 6 months is not a long time. I think what we're doing right now is we're building out kind of a smaller version of this whole thing. And we're going to see that build out until maybe 6, and then we're going to do the bigger cross. So in the grand scheme of things, timing is a little speculative, of course. I think what we just did, though, on that micro level for that diamond-y looking thing on that turnaround is pretty much the exact same thing I'm doing here. It's this structure, right? So, yeah, that's my estimation. Probably going to hit 70 by 2025, and then probably going to hit 100 maybe a few months after that. We'll see. This is a questionable area. You're better off in some ways if it got up here and it rejected or distributes. You might be better off like counting that as a big exit point for you, because I don't know for a fact that it's going to go up again. That's just speculation on how this sometimes breaks out. Usually there's that extra move after the bigger M cross. So this is just an M to get across here. And if it can be bullish, and I think it can, you should see it push back up again to jump over. But that only happens in certain situations. And my thought is it would do that also because I think we're going to go back to the original. I think we're going to go back and test the original opening price of the stock. So I don't think the first push can get you there because of these downward trends that we have. I don't think it measures out anyway. No matter how fast you go, even if we left like now, like you wouldn't get to 100. So I think it really only would happen again at an end time for this big rotation here. And to me, it measures out to June 2026. And I'm not 100% sure that I've got it measured perfectly all the time, but I'm pretty sure that this is basically what we're going to see. And it could happen much lower down here or higher up here, or middle of the road, you know what I mean? But it's the same general pattern. Yeah, so this particular angle, 60 degrees, at this point should basically match our exit trajectory here. So the way I've got it drawn looks pretty good, pretty accurate. Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty darn close. I keep saying pretty, but you know what I mean? It's not like some like wildly different scenario. This is what I would imagine. And the timing there looks almost dead on, which is good. That means that I probably did the measurements fairly accurately. There's not really anything to say would prevent us from dropping here and going low, but I think what would prevent that is where the price is, right? Because the last time we pushed to 70s, we got killed when we moved down into like 14 to 20 range. This time, I think, based on where we are, being in the 14 to 20 range may not present the same way. Like we could end up coming back down to like this bottom, but now this is where that low was in COVID, you know? So we retest something from like COVID levels over here or something, you know? And then we can make an advancement back to the original price of the stock. And these are, again, speculations. Technically, like, you know, the way this stuff goes, and this is what I'm saying, like, there's really no telling, because you could easily see this do something similar, maybe still be bullish, but just something like really slow, like that, or like this, you know what I mean? Like, it could take a while. The reason I normally would expect this is because of this cross here. Like, it almost always comes back up in a bullish scenario, assuming that it's bullish. So yeah, I'm of the opinion that maybe early next year we're back up at the 60s, but then after that, it's a kind of a big question mark block in my mind. Like, I'm just not sure. But I do believe in the similarities between this and the short-term setup that we just did today are pretty interesting. You know, I actually mentioned that I don't really feel like it's ever happened where you get that latent downward move and then upward move and then downward move, but this is kind of the same thing. It's a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially massive shake around. So there are similarities to what we see right here. Which has been a lot of my thesis for the last maybe year or so. I think I'm right. It's just the motif that AMC seems to present the most, and it makes me think that it's probably because it's the behavior of the larger picture. So it's kind of bleeding into, disseminating through all the little nitty-gritty stuff that we see day to day. And that one appears all the time. So that's where I'm at with that. Let's get this localized chart looking good. Yeah, I'm not seeing any kind of retest here on anything, so it is possible. I think it's possible we go down before we go up here. So this never pushed above, what, like 520 or 529 or something. What was it, like 529 or 528? 528. 529. And the low was 454. Man, I bet that guy that I booted is like trash talking me somewhere. He was saying he was not. I mean, he didn't get booted for saying lows. That's not the reason. So it's probably why Dave was looking also at that 581. I was looking at 490 earlier if we came back down. We may only get to 498. It's a 382. I guess it doesn't matter too much. If it slides far, we just need to get back above it. So yeah, this is a possibility. But I want to see if it's an S curve that doesn't stop I want to say it goes all the way to 586. Like that would be the natural stopping point. Is that it right there? Is like some kind of weird like uptrend here? It might be. So you're saying we're going to gap up Monday? I don't know, maybe. It looks a little distributive on this top. Looks like a little hooking motion. So we'll see. There's still time in the day. I mean, things could happen. But it looks like okay. I don't really think I care. Yeah, I don't think I care if it come back down Monday a bit. We might get 5, but there's another support here that we might hit like right around 515. We may just not go back down that far. Just head low and just bounce. Bounce out of there quick. So this is the way I see it going high. If it can't advance, again, if it can't advance here, you just need to make sure you stay above like these levels roughly. And that's pretty much all the guidance I could give right now. Everything else would be like super speculative at this moment. Yeah. Struggle, dude. If we get an up thrust at the end of the day today and it pushes up to like 538, I'm thinking it might be actually a little bearish and we might go ahead and just get that drop Monday. So like if we see a big push here, end of day, and it rockets to like 537, I'm thinking it might be because this is sort of a mirror out here in some ways of this motion. This motion right here is almost like this other one when it first came in. It may just be that that's in order to get you to that. So I would be very cautious if it pumps up to here. That could result in a pretty steep drop Monday. It's not always like a mirrored action, but a lot of times you'll see there's similarities in that motion. So, oh, what else could I do here? Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, we might get a big up thrust. There's nothing like horribly wrong about it. It's just I feel like if it's gonna happen here, it might be again sort of like a. And I don't really know. I mean, I guess it could gap way up and then do the drop higher. Gap up here and then do this kind of a downward motion up here and then bounce out. That's possible. It doesn't have to do it right here. I guess I'm thinking like either one would make some sense. And it could be like both, you know? So I'm going to leave that as an open door because I don't know. Trying to identify like this support was found on this like slight angle. And I'm wondering, I'm going to get through this quickly and go back to AMC. Wondering if we can see a strong, yeah, that actually looks correct. Okay. All right, so I found it. So it's sort of a strange one because of where it is, but there's a bottom right here. This could present itself as like a place that we come back to. So just like you would do on like the top, remember earlier when we did this downward move here, We measured it from there. We used like an intersection. I'm doing kind of the same thing here. I'm kind of using this bottom. These 2 points were support, push out, support. That angle of incline matches the angle here. So there's definitely a system of supports right there. So I'm going to keep that in the mirror, because I got a feeling that could play into this, you know. If it comes down, could be like a bouncing through here that, you know, chops along these markers potentially. Yeah, that looks like it could happen. It's got that head and shoulder vibe to it, like the wind up here and then an unwinding. Might be that we get that drop, that equal reaction back down. Come back and test this creek. This could be where we get like down low. So Monday could be a start of as like a little bit of a bust. And then Tuesday you'd be set up to potentially just run. So if we don't see any kind of like change here, we may end up coming back down Monday. Monday might actually be red, which is kind of strange. I know it's kind of backwards from what I usually would suggest that you're just going to see a continuation from Friday, but the way it's played out, I kind of wonder if this is somewhat necessary. It's sort of like a double bottom, but on an incline. Something like that. And that makes me curious, because and I think this is the middle, to some degree here to here, where is that trend going? It's a pretty strong one. I'm going to use it. I'm going to see if I can use it. It's way over here. Oh, that's not right, Booksy. Gotta go to the bottom. There it is. I was like, it should be like right there. Why is it not there? Interesting. So these are upward trajectories that are being used. And, ooh, that one's good. It's hard to get that right. It's not really a real, like, super strong point. It's gotta be like right there. I'm still like eyeballing it, but I'm trying to get it as close as I can. It's pretty close. So when a wave changes direction, there's elements on that partial move down or those moves down that help inform the new change of direction, because there should be indications of a new uptrend starting. So there's clearly like some really steep ones. You know, we can see the really steep ones. They're usually like highly visible, but then there's others that tend to be a lot more relaxed. Like this one right here, it's almost impossible to see it at first, because you're like, it's not really a trend. You're like, well, what's it doing? But notice that like this is where it kind of grabs onto it at the end and then it dumps. So I think this is actually a really good one. And then that's where it established on the bottom a support trend. So I'm thinking these are going to continue. So these are going to help, I think, potentially inform the next moves quite a bit. There's not really a wrong answer in these cases. It's just intersections of moving parts. I think this one served its purpose. Kind of gave me those targets earlier. Yeah, look at that. See, this is kind of where I had the top, and you wouldn't have necessarily batted an eye at it earlier because it was intersecting these much larger trends. It's a very similar, see that motion right here? It's a really similar motion. I think we're still iterating. Yeah, we're still iterating. So it's doing the same thing here as this. That's great. That's really good. You're like, what? That's good. Look at that acceleration too. I think it's the same move. It's getting quite fast. I wonder if this is like GME a little slower than expected though. Buy up, buy up, buy up. Oh, see this topping motion and this topping motion back here? So here's a shallow S curve right there into a big breakout. You're like, what? Who cares? They're just, it's like a rehash of the whole thing. So there's like this shallow S curve in the beginning with this big push up and this dump and push up, and then there's this dump here and this big push up, and then it slides down, tries to check lows. This slides down, it checks a higher low here. It's really similar though. This pumps high and checks the top, checks the bottom, checks the top, checks the bottom, goes into like a double top here, potentially a double top here. This is lower. It's still iterating. So the next one might be like really small. It's getting, there's no more, I would say there's no more room, but it's really getting to a place where it's kind of ridiculous. So you're accelerating. 1, 2, 3. It's good. That's good. You want to see those accelerating pushes up. I think it's the same. Looks pretty much identical to me. So we're going down? I don't know. I think that the idea of this becoming more narrow is important. So as it's narrowing, the next one you'd expect to be even more narrow. And the way the iterations work is they just kind of go until they don't. I mean, eventually something happens where like this pushes up so high and then it doesn't come back low. You might still see a very similar move, but it happens like way up here. And that's when I stop worrying about it, because usually that's like it's over, it's at the end. Someone wins out, right? Somebody wins out in the end. So it doesn't just keep going forever and ever. So if we get a distribution, I think we're going to come down and we may form like this kind of bigger move again. I don't want to get too stuck in the weeds here, but I'd like to then see it not do the same thing. So that'd be nice to get it like stopping here. Last time the iterations got ridiculous small, to the point where you couldn't even really see them. If you go back to the May one, it's like gets so crazy small that it doesn't even make sense. You know. Yeah, I'd like to see something like that where it makes a change and it doesn't go all the way down or something. And then it has nowhere else to go. Maybe it's going to be into Wednesday, since we're talking about FOMC. It would look like a bunch of nonsense if it did that, but that could happen. Y'all are like, I like this better. I like this better too, but I'm just thinking about it, and I'm like, well, if I were going to wait and try to keep the price pin, I might just do this same thing again. You know? Just like pump it as high as I can, and then drop it as low as I can, and then do the same thing again. Kind of rinse, repeat, like keep flushing. And then eventually, I mean, I guess if you were doing it till Wednesday, you probably could afford to let it set again here, and then eventually you don't see that flush come low anymore. It'd have to be like here. something would change. Like it would flush high, but then not come down as far. And then maybe it could just advance. Yeah, and then it changes direction. That would work going into FOMC if you're just trying to like pin it. Nothing going to happen until election, the month of election. Well, I don't think that's true. Election's a ways off. That's in November. Nothing happening would imply this thing just chops between 4 and 5. But we already know that nothing has happened. Like May was a big run up, and in an election year, it's a big deal. We also know like IWM ran ahead of elections. Like it didn't wait till November. It just doesn't make any sense to me that they would keep it pinned for the next several months just because the market usually runs ahead of the news. So I'd have to disagree about that. I'd like to know where he said he would dilute to get rid of up to 4 million, 100 million in debt. I don't remember that. So you might be right, but I would like to know where that was said, when that was said. He also said that recently they might be able to convert like 200, 300 million into equity. So they may not need to do what they think they need to do. I'm saying if you want to pin it till Wednesday, this is kind of what you would do. If you want it to move ahead of Wednesday, this is probably it. And anything else downward, I'll just keep the bear thesis on the page. It's pretty good. I mean, honestly, if I'm an operator who wants to run it, I'd probably consider both of these as good options. Maybe. Yeah, you never know. But maybe they already know when that deal is going to happen, and maybe we're already going to be way up high before it happens. You have to remember, like, Vanguard is the operator, not whoever he does the equity swap with. So I'm not saying they can't pin it, but this isn't like where we were when, I mean, I guess it kind of is similar, but it's not exactly the same place. I'm just saying, it's not, nothing here is set in stone. We're just talking about next week, so yeah, if this ends up going the other way, I could see it pinning till next week, and then I would just have to look at this like it's still a diamond because it's still narrowing. So if it does that, it's a shrinking iteration, sure. But at the end of the day, it's also like a diamond because you're widening and then narrowing again. It'd be a little strange. And that could get you to 646. But we already knew that, didn't we? So we already did the measurement on this before, so yeah. So that would be possible as well. That could be a later move, like just scooting everything over again, which again is like frustrating, but we don't really know how long this SOS takes. And if it doesn't move into it next week, it could change pretty dramatically timing in terms of an SOS. last time our SOS took like half a second. I mean, it was like an hour in the morning. So if it's ready to go, it's ready to go. You may not see that kind of backup. This could just be a push up, a drop, and an advancement. So all that could be really compressed at the end, and you could run up like we did last time in like 3 or 4 days. You know, I've got it kind of spread out based on other estimations for where that topping action is. So I'm still looking at early first week of August. I said that last time for July, you know, and then we had this whole other shenanigans happen. So, you know, you take it for what it is. I don't think it's fluff. I think it's a legit target. I just think that you're waiting for that confirmation of that breakout. We haven't gotten it yet. So, yeah, there we go. I'm not particularly upset by this, aside from max pain being higher and it closing below. But honestly, like, this looks correct. Like, this looks right to me. I know it's annoying because you're like, well, dang it, this is going to go way low again. It might. I mean, potentially this could come down and make a new low, but it jumped the creek. So, frankly, like, let's just get it over with. Like, end the day at the bottom here with 0% or something, or even red. I don't care. Just get the gap filled, because this could be it. This outer marking is the main creek. So, like, we shouldn't be upset or surprised that after jumping across there that it may come back down and hit that marker. So I feel like GME did kind of follow through on what we thought this morning. I had drawn it coming up and then maybe come back down. I didn't think it would drop max pain. I just thought it'd probably come up and then come right back down. But this is fine. It's a good setup again for Monday, because now you're on the opposite side of this. You're probably able to fill that gap without going further. Kind of opens the book for a number of things next week. So same deal. I think if the action is designed to pin, then we're probably going to see it flatten out here, just like it did last time. It like flattened out when it came off sideways. It jumped the creek and then it just kind of kept going sideways, very like bowl shaped, which I don't like, but it's starting to do the same thing here. So it may be that we get kind of like a bowl shaped, kind of a flattening going on into FOMC. That's sort of the sideways potential. I don't really have a whole lot of down potential now because it held the bigger creek here. So to me, it's like, it's just a retest on that outer jump. I would kind of leave it at that and not really speculate much more about it. So it looks like there was a decent amount of effort spent into pinning it below 25, and then 25.60 is kind of the next level up. So yeah, potentially pretty high ceiling here on a reactive move. If we can use this supply zone as support. We did that before here, so it's even 50-50. And I imagine, again, if it's just iterating, which is what I just said on AMC, and you're seeing this push up looked exactly the same as this one. To me, this looks more like AMC's 2020 fractal than anything else that we've seen. I mean, you could argue there's some distinct differences as well, but to me, this has that secondary move that looks almost identical to the first, but it's lower. So this one to me looks like you would pin it, more reasonably pin it, drive it back up, and then potentially like go like over here. Now, the way I had it illustrated has to do with how GME moved, not how AMC moved. So GME actually moved more like this in 2021. But in the same time period, AMC did this really low buy-in. So I wonder if they work it into Wednesday, work it up, and then have a final like drop here, and then just take it up. Could have a pretty explosive end of the week. Maybe. It has to go over this purple line. You see that? So what I'm doing is I'm looking at that purple line that comes from the two tops over here, and I'm looking at how that interacts with where we currently are. And it seems to me that, again, there's kind of like a 50-50 here. But if you're going to pin it until Wednesday, you could probably pin it pretty low. There's an intersection right here. It's a three-way intersection of the big creek down, the 2560, and this creek we're moving up, which is kind of like a hook value. And we did the same thing right here on GME, like the exact same thing. We pushed down low, right? And then we did this really slow crawling M cross up. And you can see that the place it went back to was this kind of layup setup from right here. So this jump down. So this is kind of like a jump down, right? It might go higher then. Sure, I guess you could make that argument that it goes up and then it pushes to this high. Yeah, I would make that argument. Not everything has to be like perfectly iterative. That's not how it works, but like it usually is very close to the same motion, just smaller, because that's the pattern of trading right now. It's like a behavioral model. So this goes like parabolic on Wednesday and then drops back down. So it pushes the creek. So then it's the same. Push, push, push. And then they try to do it again, and that could technically last till the next Monday. But this time it doesn't go down as far. It's the same as AMC. And then Monday the 5th just takes off. So I'm thinking that if FOMC and AMC earnings and all that jazz plays into a pinned price action next week, we may very well have kind of a boring week. It's nothing set in stone here, but excuse me. I know that kind of bums you out because I know a lot of folks, including myself, we're talking about this just kind of S-curving out. I'm not taking that off the table. And I'm really not going to argue about an alternative scenario here because it's just an alternative scenario. But I'm thinking if FOMC pins it, I wouldn't surprise me to kind of bottleneck into Thursday. And then both of these look like they would have sort of a similar move, perhaps like a big upward move, perhaps going into Friday, going into Thursday. Like they both have the same potential because GME could break here and just exit its creek. And then AMC on Wednesday, and it's set up that way, like it could pinch into this Wednesday corner. AMC on Wednesday could have a breakout as well. But I think its breakout goes up, and this is where you're going to get annoyed if you're a big GME fan. I think this breakout might be different. Like it could go up and like lay down and then Monday move, but I think it's possible this might just rip to the upside and then check here. Because last time when AMC ran, it ran really differently. Like it had its bigger pushes, like 1 and then 2. So this would be like a giant M cross. And then when it accelerated, so this is like the accelerant motion, it really went. And then Monday, so chill out into earnings, and then Monday, the 5th, again, it's kind of like, so it would be a positive week for AMC, but a fairly like low-key positive week for GME. Like GME would end up at like 25. AMC would end up at 550. And that would get you basically in like a perfect position the next week to just tear it up for like 3 days. So it depends on like the speed of things. Like if we see an early advancement, I think 586 is the first marker, and I think you'll build out here. I think if you see a later advancement, you still get the same build out, but it builds out later on this structure So these ascending parallels, you don't go to like this one, you go to like this one. Does that make sense? They're pretty much the same though. So this would give you a really clean bottom into that motion. And then who knows, probably during the earnings report, there's some kind of like a massive dump to like 5 or something silly. It's all in after hours or it's on Monday first thing and then it just rips the other way. I mean, I don't know that necessarily happens, but that kind of stuff happens all the time. So that gives you a big giant M cross that also functions as a SOS. And this one does too. It's just higher. It's like more elevated. They may look like completely the opposite thing, but they're really not. If you look at them carefully, you'll see that the pattern itself is just a wave up. But one of them gives you a wave up that's kind of low and got bigger swings. The other is like a higher wave that builds higher earlier and then pulls back in the very last minute and spends more time in the end. Which is kind of like what we did in 2020. We had that wave high, low, and then way high and then low 2021. And that gave us the SOS. So this seems very possible for next week. I don't think there's a whole lot of other scenarios for GME that I really think are super valid right now. And I know I'm a little more bearish on GME lately, but I feel like GME is not going to go that far. I don't know why. People don't agree, it's fine. But I feel like it's going to end up being like a little bit of a letdown. Maybe it'll have just really deep retracements. I guess we're going to have to wait and find out. This first move would be the biggest one. And I think we may have like really deep like retracements where there's just like super, super violent shakeouts. That's it. That's where I got to be. So yeah, I think I got it right. I don't know for sure, but I think we're seeing a secondary. I think the reason I'm like talking like this is because I'm thinking it's going to be iterative. So I think it's going to look like that. You're going to see a big breakout, but it's not going to go all the way, and then it'll like churn up for a couple days, and then it'll blow up at FOMC, and then dump one more time back down to the bottom. And it'll do the same thing down here, but just tiny into Monday, and then that's where there's no longer any. Iteratively, there's no longer any leg to stand on. This doesn't look like an SOS down here, but this is actually outside the creek. And what I've noticed on GME lately is that it makes like 2 moves that kind of present themselves. You're like, well, it's not an SOS, Booksy. Well, it kind of is in some ways. It's not like a traditional one that breaks the top of the range, but it breaks like a downward trend. And that's the trend that ultimately, once you get on top of it, you're kind of like good to go. So yeah, and then there's almost like an inverted head and shoulder right here. 1, 2, 3. It's pretty slick, actually. So this first push may actually be considerably high. I think this might actually go almost. This might go to like 25.80 or something. And then you get another move out after a pullback to the creek. Come back, check it, and then you get another kind of like big wave. I like that. I actually really think that's pretty slick. Because it's in the weakest of these looking, the smallest of these iterations that you get the most violent push, and then it's like time to go, you know? Because usually like this is the accelerated one, this one, and then this one will be like the most accelerated. So it may end up even being crazy high compared to the way I drew it. It should be fairly close to like this trajectory down. It might be really accelerated. I'm being really like, actually, yeah, this could actually push up pretty high because it could probably go push to 20, push the top here, retreat real low. It has to fail, like this one has to fail to come really significantly low, this guy. So once it gets to this point, this is where you basically have the biggest buy-in. Yeah, I don't think this is out of the question. Actually, there may be a way to figure that out, because if I go backwards from here, I don't know. It might be way higher because it just depends on this right here. I feel like they're going to do it, but I also don't know for sure. If this ends up just moving up past this point, you might just take off. You might just kind of resume this orange line, just push up to here and then take off right here. You may not have a second move down and then do it again. This is more just about the checks. Both of them would check the same spots at different times, but yeah, that looks pretty good. So somewhere in between these two. We'll have to wait probably till Wednesday. Wednesday will be the day that I think we'll know better. This just looks like a mess. It held up, but it never jump the creek here on MPW, so it's not out, which means that it may have just been like a fake move at the end of the week. Because it really didn't advance. Actually, it's funny because it worked its way back into, not in like a ha-ha kind of way, but it worked its way back into this trend. You see that? So like it managed to chop until it got underneath here. And that might be so they could knock it down. So I know I had it going low today, but it's sort of like the other two. You may get that initial Monday. If it doesn't just rocket, it's probably going to have a nice drop here. It's the waves, it's the same. I don't know. I don't know if we've made enough of a case for that S curve to just continue. It may be that we need to come right back to the 490s first and then go. Kind of seeing the same thing across the board, although, you know, for GME it might not seem that way because it's making higher lows and higher highs. I guess we'll find out. Maybe just be a small drop, like a really small chop and drop right there, while everything else is like going, you know. So they do move together, but they also don't. sometimes the severity of the ups and downs are pretty different for AMC and GME. So like what might look like consolidation, if you look closely, you could see like, well, they're buying and selling at basically the same time, but one of them's advancing and one's not. And that's actually pretty typical, which is the reason that their charts can look different. I mean, if they really were moving in tandem with one another like perfectly, then their charts would be exactly the same, and they're not exactly the same. It's because sometimes there's a different amount of buying and selling in different regions. But I think that you could see something like this happen and have GME kind of advancing, and then when AMC is kind of starting to do its takeoff mode, that's when GME kind of slows down. It's kind of like flipping back and forth almost. But the general direction is that we've made a push up. We probably need to find a bottom and then push up again and advance. So I'm going to have to say, like, more than likely, it's what it looks like. I can't really say on this for sure. But it would seem to me that, again, if it's not just an explosive move, that you're probably going to go the opposite way, first thing, and then build back out. And that could make more sense if this is a lower M cross. So it's like a smaller M within an M kind of thing. That happens quite a bit. So you have a larger one and then you have a really small one. Or even this has like a top and then a smaller one and then another top. And that gives me that parabolic kind of effect to it. So the pullbacks are smaller and then the resulting pushes end up bigger. And then going into Wednesday, yeah, this is pretty simple. Just chops around here or just underneath here. Back down here. It is timed out that way. It looks like it's timed out to be that FOMC thing. So I'll have to double check if it's on Wednesday or on Thursday. I'm not sure. But either way. All right, it looks pretty good. Looks good. Are you willing to look at SNDL? I want to be bullish for earnings / maybe they legalize for election. Chart looks so bad, and like a repeat of last year from December onwards. Well, is this like a marijuana stock? Is that why you're asking? Legalization? I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. Yeah, I can see the little symbol. I don't think any of these are really in a horrible place, but yeah, as you know, like there's typically more in favor of it in democratic states. Just tend to be a little more liberal with their social views about things like that. And the war on drugs is a ongoing debate. I think a lot of people in different classes and parties think differently about it. So I don't think it's strictly a political thing, but I do think that there's a leaning right now in general towards just legalization. And I don't really think that it's necessarily just one-sided. So there's definitely a clear effort here to keep this afloat. It's not really dipping below this bottom. So best time to buy this would be, when it's at these lows. But yeah, as a chart, do I think it looks great? No. I mean, you basically have two massive up thrusts here, and they're not really that massive. The second one's not that massive, but yeah, if somebody showed me this, I would think this looks like a distribution about to happen. Just because of the nature of this hook, but you want to pay attention to like the local trend because this is the most important region right now. It's this bottom. So on the whole, you can tell it's already broken out of that trend. So that's an easy one to do. I should go back to the daily. I'm just saying, normally if I see that kind of shape, I'm not particularly bullish, but it just depends. Yeah, do you see how this like failed to continue any kind of reversal action? So it had formed a bit of a wedge here, and it was narrowing in terms of like how large those upswings were. So regardless of whether you think it's like a perfect wedge or not, it's a pretty decent one. Lots of hits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But then there's no follow through. That's where things get kind of dicey because, and Bukowski talks about it as like a throwback. If you have a throwback where it goes back to an original price after breaking out, it kind of negates a lot of the generalized principles that end up happening. It doesn't completely erase them. It just makes it very difficult to argue that it should do this or that. Plus, there was apparently a split here. So, yeah, it's just one of those things. Probably have to take it at face value. Probably won't be able to use a lot of fancy breakout targets. It's funny because like in Wyckoff, you don't usually want the motion after an auto reaction to come lower, and a lot of the diagrams have it as like a bearish action, and that looks an auto reaction support phase B support creek jump right here, and that would have been like the big time to buy in, right? It's like right there at $1.46. Easy to see that now. And the daily crossed the moving average. So, yeah, I guess you're just looking to see if it can find support at 228. It looks a little weird because of this particular motion made a secondary upthrust, and I don't know. I don't like those on SOS. Usually indicates there's a bunch of selling. Somebody drove the price back up high. I mean, they weren't convinced it was going to keep running or something. It's making higher lows still, though. If this had come back down like immediately and made a new low and then come back up, I would basically say it's distributive. So anytime you get that double top and it immediately makes a second move that's kind of after the buying climax, and then it immediately makes a new low that goes below preliminary supports, that's, and supplies, I think that's not very good. So this doesn't look terrible. Kind of looks like a long-term. I don't know. There's not much to look at here. Let's check the weekly. Maybe the weekly looks different. I'm thinking about it. By the way, distribution does not always mean, when we say that, it just means they're getting rid of shares at certain levels. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something super nefarious or like that it's going to tank to the ends of the earth kind of thing. It's just a measurement of It's just a way of describing like a particular kind of movement, a particular kind of action with supply. So even if this went down again, what I'm trying to say is like even if this went down again, there's another creek that really hasn't been checked very much, and that's this guy. So even if it came up and distributed again above the top here and it ended up driving the price down, it might take some time. Earnings could actually cause this to move again, quite high. I'm looking at it, I'm like, I could see it, potentially trying to go back to this top or close to it. And then if it fails, to materialize, then you get like a distributive action potentially. If it fails to kind of like get enough buyers on board. Even if it did something like that, you might say it still come back down and try again. So yeah, there's a lot of things that could happen. But part of me thinks it's going to be like something more like this over time. I think it's going to be maybe choppy until November, so it makes sense. These are pretty decent swings, though. So if you do see something like this, it would be nice. I can't say what to do about earnings. I don't know the company's potential here. Yeah, something like that might work fine. It could actually be quite bullish. Like I said, this doesn't scream distribution because it didn't make a lower low. So maybe we get something like this. And it's actually quite bullish. Or waiting for like the election results or whatever. Seems like it could eke its way across and then be in a position of strength or weakness to just do a final upthrust. Like a UTAD upthrust. Like we're going to take it up and then drive the price back down. Or just take it up. To me, it looks a little like both right now. Like it could be either one. And I'm wondering if this just sets up like a little range right here. It's like clear enough pocket in a place to do that, and then you could see an advancement if it's bullish. It may not matter who wins. It just depends on what the operator thinks about it. But yeah, this is sort of my estimation. So I do think you may have reason to be a bit bullish into. The only reason I'm curious is because of this trend down, if it's going to like reject off of it and try to like head low. I guess you could stage a lot of the same stuff like lower, but I wouldn't call that much of a... I don't know. I wouldn't call that much of a... Then it'd just be like a wedge. The story is kind of the same, though. I mean, it's still like sideways. I'm not thinking it's going to just explode right now. It would be really easy, I feel. Maybe that's the reason. I feel like it'd be pretty easy to take it sideways here and just build out both types of positions. So... yeah. And you got to remember, like, a wave one, if it's a wave ones often have really deep retracements. So, like, again, even if it distributed here, this could have, like, a really deep retracement and still build out, like, a bigger wave three long term. I would check the value of it and see if it's, and the general sentiment on it, and see if there's a from institutional traders and see if there's a bent towards it being a successful company. It's an emerging market, so there's going to be some that do really well and others that don't succeed, you know. Winners and losers, as we say. Ooh, look at that. Yeah, I might change some things. And you get the idea. This is kind of the pocket it's in. It looks like it kind of reached that marker, didn't it? Oof. Yeah, it's tough. Well, when in doubt, just don't trade it. I mean, I wouldn't think it's horrible, but it just doesn't look like it's in a position to run right this second. So I feel like there's a lot of time. I'm not seeing anything that looks like a spring or like, oh, it's established a bottom now. It has a couple bottoms here, which is good. It hasn't tested them. So there's just... This would be the zone to like look out for maybe around November. Right here. I mean, if you just want shares, shares are safe, pretty safe. Nice. Yeah, like I said though, you know, with the idea that there's not going to be a better time to touch the stock like that, it's really just a matter of, do you think that it's going to continue to trend in the favor of those, and then do you think this is a winner? And if both answers are yes, then it's probably a good buy. You know, it's a similar thing with like what I talk about as charge point. It's a similar thing because it's like an emerging industry. It's growing. Some people don't like the EV car stuff. Some people like it. But you're looking at this like big picture and you're like, well, it doesn't look like a winner right now, you know, and it just depends on whether you think it's a winner or not. If you think that the EV trend is going to continue and you think it's a winner, like this stock, then this is just a massive sell down, you know, over the last few years that then is going to be bought up and potentially taken back up. I do. I think it's a winner, so I think long term it's a good investment. But I'm also, that's my opinion, right? And there's other competitors in the market. There's three or four that a lot of people look at pretty consistently, and those are the ones that are going to provide competition and who knows, man. It's tough. It's a tough world out there. Y'all are like, yeah, no duh. Yeah, but just think about it. Like, there's not that many Microsofts and Apples in the world, and when you think about computer companies, you think about Microsoft and Apple, but there's like also like HP, like Hewlett Packard. There's also Dell and like Acer or whatever it's called, like Acer, and those are ones that are not as well known. They make like cheaper, maybe make cheaper products. HP is supposed to not be, but you know. I always thought like HP computers were like the kid that has like the utilitarian like metal lunchbox that just can't be penetrated by bullets. IWM, you know, like, but think about all the little computer companies that came and went that just did not last. And when things start emerging in markets, there's always going to be some that are going to just be more favored and take off. So, yeah. If it were me, I'd probably say that a lot of the plays with that kind of recreational drug industry are probably going to be a mixed bag, and you're going to have some that just do really well, and then others that just get obliterated at some point. Gateway, I remember Gateway. I had a Gateway too. Can you check CMPS again? Yeah, I'll check it real quick. So I feel like that's the case with the marijuana stuff. It's just difficult to know who's going to be the winner. Yeah, so I had this marked up with, I guess, a few possibilities. And it looks like it kind of went between the two. Like it went ahead and checked here, and went low, and now it's breaking out. So the targets are still valid. So I think 837 was the target. So if you just look at the general direction, this was the general direction, was up. And then these two were the two different kind of paths that you could take to get to the same place. So it's sort of like in the middle of the two. So it broke down and then it went low, but it held strong and then pushed back up. So this was a deep retracement thought that I guess we must have looked at this back in a couple weeks ago in July or whatever. It didn't take that path and didn't just go straight up either. This actually did not hold, so it kind of did right in between. It did not hold, but then it started advancing anyways. So I still think that, I remember this one because we were talking about this gap, and I still think that this is, I don't know exactly how this is going to work, but I guess we'll wait and see. It looks like a breakaway here from this creek cross. So this is a pretty massive and important move out of this down. I mean, it's broken like a historical downtrend. It just had to go low, found its support, and it moved up again. I mean, if it pushes above 8 something, like 826, 836, really could just go straight up to 10. There's not much else in between. This is kind of the two major levels, here and here. Just looking back, I don't see a whole lot else. So yeah, I'm thinking that might be the case. So if it can find a support here, it'll just advance back up to like 10 or more. And since it's been in this long-term downtrend, this is a big reversal. I still think you could see a big retracement, but I'd have to wait on this one because I made it look like it was going to happen right here in August. I'd have to wait and see if it builds support. You see the last time it created a gap right down here and it just broke out and then it jumped the creek and locally and then it jumped it again. So that would be like this one and then the second jump. And it just kind of went. And it went all the way up to like 8 and then it just built out and ran again. So you'd have to sort of wait on what happens up here. But I think I'm pretty close to right about that target. And then you'll have to just again kind of wait and see if it finds support. You can find support in a number of places, but I'd look for it yeah, here at 792 and then maybe right here. This has been a really common place to find support at like 763. So in that event, you would see it perhaps top off here and then come back, find support, and then jump again, I guess, after a time. Don't know exactly what that would look like, but probably something like that. I could just keep going. Yep. Hopefully that helps. Good play. I guess if you were in it back here, you probably are doing well. The drop is scary, but it went back and retested a 1 hour moving average here. So the good news is that the hourly moving average seems to be a really strong, at least for now, it's like a pretty strong indicator. So, you know, if we got up here and chopped for a bit and that moving average like approaches, it might be a good way to kind of gauge a breakout or a breakdown, like that support. So you could watch that one. It could be really helpful. It's a 180-hour moving average right now because it's on the hourly. That makes sense? So just check it out, monitor it, because it seemed like it acted really strongly against it here. So, okie dokie. I gotta go feed my cats and work on some animation stuff after that. The day ended on AMC with a bit of a fizzle, but it looked good, man. I'm really happy it stayed above the support. That was one of my, frankly, it was kind of the bullish outcome today. But we didn't advance here. So we've got a little bit of proving to do. It looks like a false advancement. Again, I talk about cat ears, but it jumped this creek and tried to advance and then dump beneath it. You see those two pointed tops right there, 1 and 2. Normally, I would say like, okay, it's busted, and it's probably gonna go low first thing. And I'll probably just hang my hat on that for now because I don't imagine it's gonna just bounce. So I'm starting to look at this other scenario as possible. Kind of boring if it did that, but and who knows, you know, like I draw this stuff and like what just happened on that CMPS could happen. You know, sometimes you're thinking about it as right and then it ends up doing something kind of similar where like maybe this goes down and checks it and then it just starts like a build out, you know, that's similar but not quite the same, you know what I mean? And we could see something like that where it's like in the middle. I don't really want to speculate on it more than I have thus far. But I think this would provide support in this. So I think this is the pocket I'm looking at. And the build out. The rest of this is just me scribbling stuff. But yeah, that looks good. All right, guys. Hope you have a good weekend. And I will talk to you later.